And I'm feeling
This
a
season
zero
totally
out of
sucks.
10. Yes,
Headrest.
a big
Screw
fat
this.
zero.
Screw this.
A zero
This is
out of
bad.
10.
This is bad.
This is
This
the
season
worst,
sucks.
worst
Fantasy!
TV
The
show
worst
ever.
TV show ever. It's so bad.
Fuck.
Worst TV
This
show
song
ever.
sucks. Hey, yikes, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite TV shows, and today I'm gonna be doing a review on the final season of Game of Thrones. Yeah, here we are. It's the final season, and we're not gonna get any more episodes. Not anymore. No. So, yeah, Game of Thrones. It's the most popular TV show ever, and I have openly expressed how much I love the show, even though it has its low moments before. And I'm gonna spare myself from recapping the entire first 7 seasons, so feel free to watch my recap videos and link in description. Long story short, we have the good guys fighting the bad guys. Euron Greyjoy, a crazy, arrogant guy. Cersei Lannister, an evil, manipulative, cruel queen. And the Night King, an ice zombie who wants to kill all humans. For the good guys, we also have the Starks, the OG protagonists. We have Daenerys Targaryen, who had 3 dragons, now 2, and she also loves power and hates the Lannisters. And it's been almost 10 years since the pilot episode. I like seasons 2, 3, and 5, and I love the intense season 1, the ambitious season 6, and the magical and unpredictable season 4. Then we have the very political season 7, and 2 years later, we have this. It's season 8, and it's the final season. And this season only has 6 episodes. Yeah, 6 episodes. I was honestly expecting 6 mini movies. Also, I'm gonna give scores to every episode in this season individually, because now there are only 6 episodes. Every episode means a lot. So I'm also gonna give a minor spoiler alert because it's Game of Thrones, so if you haven't watched seasons 1 to 7, I just don't recommend you to watch this video. You can feel free to look at the description of the video and check out the score, or you can skip till the end to watch the score announcement. But of course, I recommend you to watch this video after you've finished the whole series. That would be pretty nice. So yeah, Game of Thrones season 8 really, really blew my mind. I think it's really, really shocking. Not because of the plot, but because of the hate that it's getting. Game of Thrones is one of the most beloved TV shows ever, but it just blows my mind. It blows my mind to see this much hate that the show is getting. This many hate comments, this many negative reviews. You know, it's just, it's getting extremely low IMDb ratings, extremely low Rotten Tomato ratings, really bad reviews, negative YouTube comments, tweets, and Instagram posts, and like 90% of the world is generally mad about the final season of Game of Thrones. And I am surprised. And instead of being angry with the show, I'm actually kind of sad, because this is a show that I've once invested a lot into, emotionally speaking. I invested a lot into the show, and I invested a lot into many of the characters in the show, and to see it kind of fade out and fizzle out like this, it's actually just kind of saddening, and I really wish that season 8 would just turn out the other way. But however, I don't hate the season as much as people in general is. I think there are actually good moments in the season that are generally overlooked and underrated. So I'm gonna talk about the final season. Here we go. Right off the bat, episode 1, Winterfell, is only 54 minutes long. It's not a very ambitious episode, and it's still pretty political. The episode is mostly just reunions. Jon Snow and Daenerys had arrived at Winterfell, and Jon reunited with Bran and Arya. Arya and Jon's reunion is pretty sweet. I love it. It just overwhelms me how many stories Arya and Jon could tell to each other, and Arya reunited with the Hound and Gendry as well. The latter of the two could potentially be her love, starting from the first episode. Sansa reunited with Tyrion, Jorah reunited with Samwell, Samwell reunited with Jon, and at the end, Jaime with Bran. That ending scene was both awkward and fun. Also, the opening sequence is changed up a little bit, and it's cooler now, actually. That scene where Daenerys told Sam about killing his dad and brother is just heartbreaking. Plus, the scenes where Arya and Sansa warn Jon about over-trusting Dany makes Dany a potential villain right from the beginning. But that being said, shout out to John Bradley. John Bradley is the MVP of episode 1. In other news, Cersei and Euron smashed, and Theon saved Yara. I was kinda underwhelmed by that scene, actually. That scene happened so fast. It could have been a very intense fight between Theon and Euron. It could have been a battle. But no, it just happened very smoothly and very quickly. And quietly as well. The second last scene is awesome though. Tormund, Beric, and Eddie came back together and they were at last hearth. What? Why? Out of all the places in Westeros, last hearth. There it is. Season 8. So, it's still a really awesome scene, however. They see this kid who was Lord of House Umber, and he's being chopped up and surrounded by chopped up hands, displayed like a cyclone, which is absolutely horrifying, and the boy suddenly woke up as a White Walker, and it almost scared the living shit out of me. But still, overall, I think it's a solid episode. It could have been better, though. Kinda disappointed that the first episode, 1/6 of the final season, pretty underwhelming because not much had happened, but still, it's still like not a terrible episode, okay? I'm giving this episode a decent 7 out of 10. Over to episode 2 of 6, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. And it takes place entirely in Winterfell. The last time we had an episode taking place entirely at one place was actually the Watchers on the Wall, I think, which completely took place in Castle Black. And on the first scene, Jaime arrived at Winterfell again. There are some interesting character interactions, but that's pretty much just it. There are 3 scenes in the episode where a bunch of characters just sit around a fire and talk. Jaime knighted Brienne, and it's a pretty cool scene. Podrick also had some singing chops, and it's Daniel Portman. That's his name, right? Daniel Portman. Singing chops. Yeah. Also, towards the end of the episode, Arya and Gendry had a sex scene. Yeah. And that's quite unexpected, but I kind of knew that one day Maisie Williams will shoot a more adult scene. And to be honest, I'm not disgusted about the scene. In fact, I'm happy that Arya got to explore her sexuality and be a real Chad. Other than that, it's all pretty much dialogues. I dislike that one scene where Sansa and Daenerys sat down and had a nice chat. Then the conversation just ended bitterly, just went down south. It feels kind of out of character and uncomfortable, especially when we are hit by these uncomfortable close-up shots of Sophie Turner and Emilia Clarke. Overall, episode 2, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, is nowhere higher than a light 8. Maybe a strong 7. I'll probably gonna give it a strong 7, but close to a light 8, I guess. Then let's move over to episode 3, The Long Night. It's the longest Game of Thrones episode with 1 hour and 22 minutes long, and it's an extremely large battle episode that we have been waiting for 7 seasons now. It's the battle between the living and the dead. It is an entirely battle episode with an extremely large budget. The first battle out of the 2 battles of the season. So, let's get this out of the way first, apparently. I kind of wish this battle and the next one would switch orders, because I feel like a lot more characters would have been killed in this battle rather than in the last battle. But I also kind of get it. The last battle in some ways is more important to the overall narrative flow of the series, but still, I kind of, this battle should have been deadlier, theoretically, than the final one. So it's just a little weird. A little weird, you know? Anyway, overall, I have no idea how I should feel about this episode. It's extremely gorgeous, and it has some really, really, really tense scenes, but they're all sort of scattered here and there without much in terms of organization or focus. There are some character deaths, but they all feel kind of toothless and powerless, except for one, I guess. There are ups and downs in here, there, and everywhere, and there are layers. There are so many counterparts, yet the episode feels like a cheap ride with a few expensive moments, maybe also a couple of great surprises. Technically, it's a masterpiece. Narratively, it's great, but at the same time, not quite. There aren't enough overall tension and urgency. The stakes feel like they're not high enough, and actions don't bear enough consequence. But again, great action sequences. They look really epic, and they feel like an insane roller coaster ride, but a cheap one. It's so poetic, yet so cliche. It's intense, but also kind of messy. It's so climactic, yet so anticlimactic. There's something about this episode that just tears me apart. And this episode actually inspires me to make my own fan fiction for Game of Thrones Season 8, or should I say fan correction. But yeah, overall, I think this episode could be both a 9 and a 6 at the same time. So I'm giving a spoiler alert. I'm gonna extensively talk about this episode, and I'm gonna study and analyze the hell out of this episode. So sit back, grab some popcorn, and here's my thoughts. So this is the most important battle in Game of Thrones. Well, in the Song of Ice and Fire, at least, they say that winter is coming. What is dead may never die. And it's finally here, and it's supposed to be this ultimate battle of the ages, and we are expecting so many characters to die. It's gonna be this terrifying massacre, just like how Nanny described it to Bran in Season 1. But in reality, the battle wasn't really that crazy, in my opinion. Right off the bat, Melisandre returns for one last time, and I'm actually glad that it happened. She lit up all the Dothraki swords, and she lit up the trenches later. Two very epic and beautiful scenes. And then after that, after silence was over, the Dothraki charges headfirst right at the Night Army, and that scene looked gorgeous as well, but it's incredibly dumb how they would just toss away all the Dothrakis by making them attack first. Then after more silence, which leads to suspense, and I love it a lot, waves after waves of whites came out. Daenerys hopped onto Drogon ASAP and burnt a portion of the whites. Those scenes are entertaining, but now let's raise the stakes, right? Not really. The episode kind of stays in that situation for a long time. Ed, the last Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, kinda died, which is totally predictable because after this battle, the Night's Watch will be pretty much useless, but yeah, I hope that he dies with much more consequence. Like he dies accomplishing this, which favors the good guys by doing this, and this happens. But no, there aren't much cause and effects in this episode, which is one of the major flaws in my opinion. Then after Melisandre lit the trenches, the whites sort of stood there not doing anything, while Jon and Daenerys were playing hide-and-seek with the Night King, riding their respective dragons. Then the whites started to break the trench and infiltrate the walls of Winterfell. Again, intense scene. Great way to transition over to Act 2. We have another set of main character fights where we see Brienne, Jaime, Pod, Gendry, Samwell, Tormund, and the Hound and Beric fight off whites, which are more of the same with what already had happened. Also, Samwell hadn't died yet, apparently, which is kind of strange in my opinion. And then the episode suddenly changes focus to Arya, and solely Arya. Arya was like, I've had enough of this shit, and she started slaying whites herself with her double-edged staff. Amazing choreography, by the way, but it's this weird out-of-place moment for the overall flow of the battle, unless we clearly know what are Arya's purposes of the battle, which are kind of revealed later on in the episode, but like, it's still a mess. Yeah, an ice giant broke into the courtyard and slapped Lyanna Mormont real hard. That scene was rough. But of course they have to pull off this David and Goliath thing, so the giant picked up Lyanna, crushed her while Lyanna stabbed at the giant's eye, and both died. Then we have Arya somehow ended up in a library, so she had to sneak out. Suspenseful? Yes. Oddly placed scene? Also, yes, then Beric and the Hound came out of nowhere and saved Arya, but Beric sacrificed himself and died. I kinda wish Beric's death would be more dramatic though, it's a little too lingered on. Then Melisandre showed up and told Arya that she would shut Blue Eyes forever, which means Arya would kill the Night King. So that's crazy, except I have no idea where was Arya, where was the Night King, where was Bran. The whole thing was a mess and the stakes didn't feel present. We have a very shaky sequence where Rhaegal and Ice Dragon Viserion fought, and it's hard to keep track of that, but I kinda wish Tyrion would just come out of the crypt and try to shoot Viserion with a dragon glass arrow or something with a crossbow, like the way he killed his father, Tywin. Also another scene where the Night King fell off the dragon and Drogon just spat fire on him. He survived the fire and smirked at Daenerys, which would have been cooler if the Night King would make some noise or do something in return, like creating ice spikes raining from the sky or something. In the crypts, Tyrion and Sansa were there and dead people started to come alive. Stupid, but it would have made a pretty intense thriller scene. Would have been even scarier if the Night King just goes straight to the crypt first, then to Bran. And also, I'm sad that Jon Snow and the Night King didn't have a 1v1. At the end, the music starts to play, and it's quite beautiful, actually. Everyone who were supposed to protect Bran died except for Theon, and the Night King and his army arrived. So Theon just charged straight ahead the Night King and got stabbed and bit the dust. Again, his death didn't really have the consequence that I really wanted. It felt heavy and painful, but I just wished for more. Anyway, as the Night King was about to kill Bran, Arya popped up out of nowhere and tried to stab the Night King with her left hand. Night King was fast and grabbed her by the neck. She dropped the knife from the left hand to her right hand and then stabbed him with the right hand, and the entire Night army just died. This scene is actually really well designed and it's surprising, but overall it's not a very great way to kill off the Night King. I kinda wish killing the Night King would be 10 times more difficult, but I love the fact that Arya was the one who did it, which is kinda symbolic actually, but I wish Arya would be wearing one of the Night General's faces. Anyway, Jorah died, Melisandre took off her necklace and turned to dust and died. Again, anticlimactic death for Melisandre. I'd rather have her sacrifice herself to kill off some more Night Generals, and I also wish Sansa and Tyrion would have more action. You know, I feel bad for Sophie Turner and Peter Dinklage and Conleth Hill, actually. Everybody's got cool fight scenes to shoot and they're just trapped underground. And I wish the stakes were higher. I wish there are more surprise deaths that take place at the same time. I think that Brienne should also die too in some way. Maybe Grey Worm should also die in the episode. Samwell doesn't have to die, even though it would be realistic, because it would be funny if he survives both the Great Wars of the season. But that means Sam had to hide somewhere else. I also wish both the armies would try to outsmart each other and break the pattern, and I wish the battle is a little more coordinated. But still, it's a very impressive episode. Weeks after weeks of training and practicing and shooting. The production design is immaculate, the editing is nice, and Ramin Djawadi still makes cool jams. So I gotta give them that. But still, it's underwhelming in many small ways. What's worrying is that I bet this episode looked so good on paper, but not so good on a TV screen. So yes, it's a decent 9 and a strong 6 at the same time. Maybe I'll even them out and be generous and I'll give the episode a light 8, maybe a strong 7, actually. Okay, we gotta speed it up right now. And then on to the third last episode of the entire show, The Last of the Starks. And both surprisingly and unsurprisingly, it doesn't live up to the standards that many previous Game of Thrones episodes had set. Even though like 80% of the fans on the internet hated the episode, it totally flopped in Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. I still think it's the best episode of the season so far, with the most progress and the most tension, but not as ridiculous and ludicrous as the Battle of Winterfell. You know what really bugs me about this episode is that it has so much unrealized potential, to become intense and climactic and game-changing, but no, the show still feels kind of sluggish despite there having only 3 episodes left. Again, the lack of plot points is just so saddening because of how many things could have happened. I was still waiting for Varys to die, he had to die. I was still waiting for Tyrion to be smart again, still waiting for Daenerys to go insane, still waiting for Cersei to do something surprisingly evil, still waiting for Daario, Quaithe, and Faceless Man to show up. At least I hoped they would. The first and second scenes are alright. People are mourning for deaths and deaths after the battle. Next scene, they're celebrating joyfully. So joyful, Emilia Clarke's cup of Starbucks is literally on the set, and the camera was rolling, the take was shot, and it made it into the cutting room floor and into the final product of the episode, but yet no one in the cast or crew noticed. Maybe it's because David and Dan were busy acting undercover as wildlings, or maybe it's just a product placement. I don't know. And then after that, there are around 6 or 7 scenes that are just more character interactions. I like character interactions, but I wish they would cut them short because the episode should have gotten more time for something entertaining and intense and not this. Sansa and the Hound's chat, cut it short. Jaime and Brienne making out, cut it short. By the way, what's the point of that anyway? However, I do like the scenes where Dany felt jealous of the attention that Jon was getting. It would really fuel Dany to turn insane. Gendry became Lord of Storm's End. He asked Arya to be the lady, and of course Arya declined because she's too cool for that shit. And then in the next day, she just hopped onto a horse and left, and she said she would never return. Excuse me? Admittedly, the second half of the episode was way more entertaining. Euron's fleet popped up out of nowhere in Dragonstone and ambushed Dany's fleet. Doesn't make much sense, but hey, it's entertaining, and that's all I need. There's one death scene, and it was surprising even though it felt abrupt and weightless, and that scene where Tyrion was on that boat and that boat was being attacked, that scene was some good shit. That's the action that I signed up for. Only if it's 10 times more intense, of course. But still, the last scene was tense and climactic, even though it's still not that great. I'm feeling a light to decent 8 for the episode, and then I have to drop a spoiler alert. So during the attack, Euron captured Missandei and teleported back to King's Landing. Dany's gang found out, so they teleported to the outskirts of King's Landing, as well as tried to negotiate. Either Cersei surrender and free Missandei, or Dany would burn King's Landing to the ground. And there's a scene where Tyrion wanted to persuade Cersei to surrender and free Missandei. I love that scene. It does feel tense, and I rooted for Tyrion a lot. But then, of course, Cersei didn't listen and ordered the Mountain to chop Missandei's head off, which is sad. On the other hand, Varys had been having ideas of betraying Dany, but Tyrion disagreed with Varys. I just wished that they both would betray her, and shit happens. Over to the penultimate episode of the entire series, and it's titled The Bells. And once again, it's the kind of episode that you would constantly think about in the next 24 hours after you watch the episode. It's such a polarizing episode. 20% of the people actually enjoyed the episode, while the other 80% still hating the show like hardcore. In fact, I feel terrible for the cast and crew to put up with all this hatred. They have worked their asses off for this, and all they get is a bazillion hate comments and negative reviews. And truth be told, unpopular opinion here, but I enjoyed this episode. A lot, in fact. This episode is a 9 out of 10 for me. Yes, it's fucking insane. Exactly opposite of episode 3. Double D are unapologetic. Tons of characters died, the entire King's Landing in jeopardy, and the last 20 minutes were so painful to watch and so scary. I just kind of wish that episode 3 would be just as intense and as horrifying as this one. Yes, I know, there are some flawed character arcs. I think Tyrion should have been smarter. It just pisses me off that Tyrion wasn't as smart, and also I kind of wish some of the character deaths would have happened that way, but still, comparing with a normal fantasy TV show, this is excellent. It's also incredibly heartbreaking, tragic, and cataclysmic. If only the character changes wasn't so rushed, I think this episode would have deserved a 10 out of 10. And please don't hate me for not hating something we all used to not hate. Yeah, anyway, again, spoiler alert. The first few scenes actually felt fantastic. Varys tried to poison Daenerys but failed, later got captured and was burnt to death by Daenerys and Drogon. We all saw that coming. Melisandre literally predicted his death. Also, Daenerys would be betrayed 3 times according to the House of Undying in Qarth. But still, I wish his death would have been more emotional and powerful, and I wish Tyrion and Jon would just snap and realize that Daenerys was potentially a big baddie. Anyway, Jaime was caught by Dany's army, but Tyrion freed him. Thus, we have an emotional and powerful final scene between the two. And after that, Miguel Sapochnik's directing skills finally shined as we get a lot of shots of the Golden Company assembling and the civilians of King's Landing panicking and running. A lot of stunning and beautiful shots, actually. 10 times, 20 times more beautiful and well shot than some of the shots on episode 3. Loving the sound editing too. Oh wow, yeah. Anyway, the battle was about to begin. The Iron Fleet was fully prepared to shoot down Drogon. Then, as expected, Dany and Drogon arrived, except none of the arrows hit Drogon and all of the Iron Fleet was destroyed. All. Plus, all of these Scorpion crossbows used to destroy Drogon, all burnt down to a crisp. Then Drogon just destroyed a chunk of the wall of the city and completely obliterated a pack of Golden Company. The Northerners, Unsullied, and Dothraki charged into King's Landing as Grey Worm slayed Harry Strickland, captain of the Golden Company. That scene was real tense and entertaining. Kinda wish episode 3 would be like that though. And then after a while of charging into King's Landing, killing soldiers, the Golden Company gave up entirely. They're fucked. King's Landing's fucked. Cersei's doomed to die. Then we get these shouts from the crowds. Ring the bells! Ring the bells! Ring the bells! And it basically meant the city had surrendered and Daenerys had agreed that if the bells were rung, she would stop charging and the Unsullied would fall back and it would be a peaceful victory. But of course, Daenerys with all her rage and anger continued to fly her dragon and burn buildings and destroy houses and kill innocent civilians. Then we know she had completely transitioned into a villain. Yes, kinda rushed, but still a great character arc nonetheless. Especially when we see all these shots of innocent women and children screaming for help, people burning and being stabbed, bleeding and dying. Wow, that's actually really hard-hitting. More than ever, I wanted Daenerys to die. She's the real villain. Then when Jaime was going into the Red Keep, Euron came out of nowhere and started fighting Jaime. Jaime almost died, but he stabbed Euron at the end. Even though this does feel like a pretty cheap ending for Euron, at least we get to see one last intense fight for Jaime. And then we have the Clegane Bowl, which is fantastic in my opinion. The Hound got up to Cersei, Qyburn, and the Mountain. The Mountain wanted to fight the Hound and Qyburn wanted to stop him, and then he just got thrown onto a rock and got smashed to death. That was really funny. Then Cersei just slipped away and now we have Clegane Bowl, which is intense and devastating. The Hound just realized that he couldn't kill the Mountain unless they both die by falling from the Red Keep into the fire. So they did, and it was such a sad but also savage ending for both characters. Arya also managed to live after almost being crushed to death twice. She almost saved a mother and a daughter but failed anyway, which is really saddening. But what's most saddening is how Cersei and Jaime died. Yes, I wish their death scenes would be more epic, but still, their deaths are actually really beautiful and poetic in my opinion. They were about to escape, both of them are at their most vulnerable moments, but since their exits are blocked, they couldn't leave, so they stayed underground and died together. Lots of people complain about Jaime's circular character arc, where at the end he turns to Cersei again, but I think it's a fitting character arc for Jaime because ultimately, Jaime is all about family, and he hates people who would say, burn them all! Okay. And damn, I never thought I would actually tear up for Cersei, but I actually did, and it was kinda insane, actually. So yes, again, even though there are a couple of character arc missteps in the episode, I still think it's an epic masterpiece that's extremely well directed, well shot, and well acted. It's a 9 out of 10, at least. Sorry, I have to turn on the air conditioning, it's just too hot. And then here we are at the finale of the entire series. It's Season 8, Episode 6, The Iron Throne, and truth be told, I'm really disappointed. While I think it's a pretty poetic and poignant ending, definitely underwhelming, especially as the final episode of the most popular and iconic TV show ever. So after the carnage that took place on Episode 5, this episode felt like an aftermath episode, except it's being dragged on for 1 hour and 20 minutes, with a so-so climactic scene kinda slapped at the end of the first act. I really wanted to like the ending. Trust me, I do. But I can't help but feel kinda cheated at the end of the finale because of how hollow and empty and toothless the finale feels like. I do like at the end of the episode, everyone's doing what they like, living their best life, and I do like a couple of scenes in the first leg of the episode. But still, the rest are just mediocre. It's mainly talking and that's pretty much it. I'm honestly feeling a decent 6 for the episode. Yeah, and I'm already being extra generous here. I'm giving it a 6 for the good ass performances, good music, nice directing, nice cinematography, and a nice set. But the writing is just lackluster. Spoiler alert. Let's get to the pros first. That scene where Tyrion was like, I freed my brother, and you slaughtered a city, and threw away his badge. That was pretty good. I also like that Arya sailing to the west of Westeros. It's really in line with her character, but that's it. So Tyrion convinced Jon to stab Daenerys, so Jon did, and then boom, she's dead. One stab and she's dead. Drogon popped up out of nowhere, kinda pissed off, and then just spat fire for some reason and melted the Iron Throne, which could have made for an interesting ending where they end the whole dynasty system and start electing presidents, but not really. A couple weeks later, there was no one to rule Westeros, and at that point, Night King's dead, Cersei's dead, Dany's dead, and Grey Worm's a dick, but not really. Tyrion was held as prisoner, and then he chose Bran Stark as king, and everybody was like, yeah, and Grey Worm did nothing about it, apparently. So all the talk about Jon Snow being the rightful heir was all thrown out the window, and Bran being literally thrown out a window, and saying that he can't be lords or anyone in Season 7, and now leading him to be king at the end of Season 8. I have one interesting theory, though. Maybe this is all set up by Bran, maybe, it's all his plan, who knows. Anyway, at the meeting, Edmure Tully and Yara Greyjoy were there as well. And I think Edmure Tully should have died in some way. It's Game of Thrones. You win or you die. So Edmure Tully somehow won? Yeah, the last scene for Tyrion was literally a small council meeting with Bronn, Brienne, Sam, and Davos, and they started arguing if ships or brothels were more important. And at the end, Jon Snow leading the wildlings back up the north, and that's the last show of the entire fucking series. I do like that it sort of juxtaposes with the first shot of the entire series, but still, come on, guys. Really? Come on, Double D. Really? This episode is seriously underwhelming, and it is uneventful and empty. Overall, Game of Thrones Season 8 really didn't go as planned. David Benioff and D.B. Wise did an oopsie. And that's actually kind of sad, considering Game of Thrones is one of the most praised TV shows of all times. Sticking the landing is very important. However, I'm not saying that this season is terrible, it's not that bad, but still, it's easily the worst season of the show, and it's one of the most underwhelming experiences in TV history. There are some good scenes here and there throughout episodes 1, 2, and 4, and I think episode 4 is pretty underrated actually, with a tense but sad ending scene. I think episode 3 is the most boring battle episode of it all, with a weird ending, but still, I'm not saying that there aren't anything entertaining about episode 3, and in my opinion, episode 5 is a total banger of an episode, even though some characters feel wasted and rushed, it's still cataclysmic and heartbreaking. And the finale is a downer. That being said, I still can't believe how much hate this show is getting. It's actually phenomenal. Tons upon tons of angry YouTube videos ranting about how this season sucked. Tons and tons of tweets complaining. Tons and tons of articles on the internet. It's astonishing, really. But still, you have to admit, the acting performances are still top-notch, the soundtrack is excellent, the directing is good, and the sets are insanely fantastic. The cast and crew worked their asses off building these sets, doing these makeups for every extra, these actors waking up super early to put on their costumes, and also, for episode 3, they have to work from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. or something for 2 months straight. So to some degree, I'm still impressed with what the season has to offer, but still I think it all comes down to 3 points. 1, the characters. A lot of the characters in the show didn't get the ending they deserve and didn't have their own shining moments. That makes sense, of course. 2, the overall flow. There are some moments that are just being drawn out by some slow, aimless dialogue, while other parts feel rushed and sudden. 3, the lack of plot points. For the final season, the writers can't just make 6 episodes setting up for 2 battles, and that's it. There needs to be more twists and turns, so that there are more climactic scenes. That being said, I'm gonna be generous here. Episode 1 is a 7.7, Episode 2 is a 7.8, Episode 3 is a 7.8 as well, but for different reasons, and Episode 4, 8.3. Episode 5 is a 9.3, yeah, and Episode 6, 6.6. Should have been lower, to be honest. Should have been lower. I don't hate the season, and I don't like it either. So, yeah, it's just a really disappointing season. And by the way, characters like Dario, Quaithe, the Faceless Man, and hell, the witch who creeped off Varys. Where are they? Where are they? And to some degree, I think that Double D kind of gave up Game of Thrones and kind of focused a little too much on their next Star Wars project. So, yeah, again, I don't hate the season. I don't think it's terrible, but I still think it's a really underwhelming one. And my favorite episode is the bells, and my least favorite is the finale. I am saying Game of Thrones season 8 is meh, and I'm giving it a strong 6 to a light 7 out of 10. I'm being really generous here. Really generous. So, have you watched Game of Thrones Season 8? From 1 to 10, how much did you rate it? Like if you like it, hate if you hate it, and subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. I have no time.